Today we're discussing the consequences of the 1967 war fought between Israel and its neighbors, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. This conflict, also known as the June War because of when it took place, and the Six-Day War, the favored Israeli term because it lasted for only 6 days, and called to mind the biblical account of Israel's God creating the world in 6 days. For such a brief war, though, it made a huge impact. Its victory included the occupation of Syria's Golan Heights, Egypt's Gaza Strip and Sinai Peninsula, and Jordan's West Bank. Israel also reclaimed East Jerusalem from Jordanian control after 19 years, as you can see in these two maps of 1949 and 1967. It's no wonder most people consider the Six-Day War to be the most important event in Israel's history since its birth in 1948. But first, a quick recap of the war itself. It was really the climax of a chain of events in the Middle East. Egyptian President Gamal Nasser closed the Straits of Tiran to Israeli ships, effectively blockading Israeli commerce and trying to strangle Israel commercially. Israel regarded this move, as did much of the world, as an act of war. In response, Prime Minister Levi Eshkol, along with some of the leaders of his unity government that he put together to respond to this diplomatic move and aggressive move on Nasser's part, two of those leaders in the unity government, Moshe Dayan and Menachem Begin, decided that Israel needed to launch a preemptive strike and aggressively attack the Arab states massing to destroy the young country. In the early morning of June 5th, 1967, after the Israeli cabinet had made the collective decision to launch such a strike, Israel's Air Force launched an assault, effectively destroying the capabilities of the entire Egyptian and Syrian air forces, as you can see in this photo. With the skies clear, it only took a few days for Israel's armored forces to seize complete control in campaigns in the south against Egypt and in the north against Syria, leading to the capture of the Sinai, the Gaza Strip, and the Golan Heights. The Israeli Defense Forces also effectively defeated and expelled Jordanian armed forces from the West Bank and East Jerusalem, which had been occupied by Jordan since the War of Independence in 1948. In the immediate aftermath of the war, happiness mixed with relief. For a country so intimately connected to the destruction of European Jewry, and that had seemingly come so close to yet another chapter of tragedy. Instead, Jews everywhere could revel in the country's massive and strikingly fast success on the battlefield. However, Israel was unprepared for the consequences of their victory, which were several. First, the state now assumed authority over masses of Palestinian Arabs, 600,000 in the West Bank and 400,000 in the Gaza Strip. Contrary to Zionist assumptions, the Arabs outside of the land of Israel, that is to say the neighboring states, were almost universally unwilling to accept Israel's military victory as politically decisive regarding the state's existence, or to accept any Jewish claim or tie to historic Jerusalem. Of course, Israel had hoped all along that a decisive victory would in effect force Arabs to give up their hopes of delegitimizing Israel and destroying it, and instead come to the negotiating table and to make peace. Zionism in general adjusted to a new normal caused by the taking of so much land. The country tripled in size, if you look back at those two maps, in only 6 days, and psychically no longer seemed quite such a David to its Goliath neighbors. Politically, increasingly different groups voiced their preference that Israel settle themselves in these occupied territories rather than thinking of them as bargaining chips, things to be returned for in exchange for peace. Some of those advocates, including Labor Minister Yigal Allon, came from Israel's political and social left and merged territorial expansionism with socialism and security concerns about defending the Jordan Valley. Allon's plan proposed negotiated partition of the territories and called for Israel to retain 1/3 of the West Bank, where they would build settlements and military outposts to protect itself from military invasion along the Jordan Valley. Though never fully ratified or implemented, the Allon's plan core idea of a buffer zone in the West Bank, a kind of a cordon, became a normative view for thinking about Israel's defense needs after 67, as you can see from the map of Allon's design for a future peace settlement. Political and literary secular figures in Israel after 67 formed another pro-settlement group called the Greater Israel Movement, Eretz Yisrael Hashlema in Hebrew. This attitude suggested the depth of feeling about the memory of older dreams and realities of Zionist building of the land in places like the Tzion block in the West Bank, a community destroyed in the War of Independence and seen as integral to a truly redeemed land of Israel and the Jewish people. Most importantly, a new variation on Zionism emerged from within the National Religious Party, the Gush Emunim. The National Religious Party traditionally had been dovish and not particularly aggressive about land acquisition and supporters of peace treaties. But followers of Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook, who had served as the first chief rabbi in the pre-statehood period, and his son, Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook, believed in a mystical theology that saw the human act of settling the Holy Land as part of the messianic redemption of the Jewish people and of the universe. By making the land of Israel a substitute, in effect, for a personal Messiah, this group made settlement a deeply political and spiritual act necessary for the bringing of the end of days. Finally, consider the impact of the Six-Day War on the Middle East. The Arab defeat shattered the credibility of Nasser and his campaign for pan-Arabism as a vehicle, and socialism as a vehicle of Arab modernization. The Islamic movement filled the vacuum caused by pan-Arabist decline. The Islamists argued that Western-style secular nationalism, a la Nasser, as you can see in this picture, he looks like a Western politician, was a false messiah, and that only Islam provided the solution to the modern problem of Arab identity. On the other side of the coin, Arab state interests in societies like Egypt and Syria especially increasingly invested less energy in the general Arab cause and more in their own domestic projects. And this meant increasingly ignoring the Palestinian problem as well. This left the Palestinians to fend for themselves. In sum, a brief war of 6 days caused an upheaval within Israel, within its neighbors, and within the entire region, which lasted for decades and changed history.